Stacy.
Hi, EJ. Is this how we're starting the podcast?
I'm trying to mix it up.
Hi, EJ. Hello, listeners.
This is for the love of language.
This is how we're starting the podcast today. Oh
well,
my God.
I am actually so excited about the podcast today. Stacy knows that I freaked out when we got this question. I asked on our Instagram if anybody had topics or linguistics questions that they wanted us to talk about.
Yep.
And the first question that came in was, why can't white people roll their R's?
Which is just chef's kiss.
Oh,
Perfect.
This is a
perfect formatting of this question. Beautiful
question. I love how honest and direct it is, and there is so much that we can talk about here. So, yeah, I'm just so excited about this question. It's fantastic. So, why can't white people roll their R's?
Let's take it back one quick second. Why are you so excited about this question? Is it because of the answer or just the way it was phrased?
Well, I love this question because it reveals multiple layers of, it's a cultural question, it's a historical question, it's a phonetics question, and it actually ties in, I think everybody at one point or another, especially if you've tried to learn another language, has wondered, why are Chinese tones so fucking hard? You just sent me a TikTok the other day that was hilarious about Chinese tones.
It was great.
But then for other people, it's like if you have someone learning English from a language that doesn't have dental fricatives, the sound, as in the word the, them, their, these, that might be extremely difficult. So this is an extremely common thing to happen. It's just a very specific instance of it.
Yes.
But I think it's a brilliant question.
It is. It really is. So I guess let's break it down from the scientific side first. Let's talk about just rolling your R's in general. Yeah, let's talk about that, and then we can dive into the
let's even
parts of it.
Disclaim this a little bit. I think it is important to understand this question in the context with which it's coming from.
Yes.
I don't personally know the person that's asking the question, but
so this is a person that I know. I know the person who asked this question, and they are Latinx.
Okay. And that's what I would have assumed, Hispanic. Is that this is someone speaking Spanish and talking about Americans, pretty much.
Yes.
Right? And so, because fundamentally, if you're talking about white people, there is nothing distinctive about a white person's mouth that makes it so that they cannot roll their R's. And there's actually languages that are the first language of white communities, like Russian. In Russian, Russians roll their R's.
Yes.
And a lot of Russians are white. And so it's not actually a white person thing, but if you look at it in the context of, okay, a Latin American talking about Americans, this question makes perfect sense. And as a white person myself who can roll my R's, there's a little bit of me that's well, I can, but I have to hold myself back and say yeah, but I'm an exception. I grew up moving to different countries and being exposed to these other languages very early on. And so the question is valid in the sense that it is a general truth that people who grow up just speaking English are going to have a harder time rolling their R's.
Yes. This is correct. So with that disclaimer, with that context for everybody, let's dive into a little bit about phonetics. So the beautiful, wonderful thing about phonetics is that when you are born and you've got people who are speaking around you, you can't speak yet because you don't know how to move your body in such a way. But you've got people speaking around you, and you're gathering all of this data, putting it inside of your brain. And usually in a monolinguistic setting, there's only going to be one language that kind of stands out, and your baby brain starts piecing out the different sounds that are being made and starts categorizing them. And this categorical list of sounds is what we call your phonetic inventory. So it's basically just a list of sounds that you can hear and understand, and eventually, and I say eventually because sometimes your production and your perception might not add up, right? Like young children can, we're going to stick with like American English for a second. Young children can understand the hard R sound, as in like reading and writing, but it takes them a while to produce it just because the way that the hard R's produced is kind of complicated. So they might say weeding and whiting, but it's still there. The R is still part of their phonetic inventory. It's just, it takes a while for it to get from perception to production. So everybody has just this giant list of sounds that they're able to comprehend and understand and eventually produce.
Can I tangent off that real quick?
Absolutely.
So when it does come to children in these situations, a lot of times adults will have the tendency to say like, oh, my child just said whiting instead of writing. And so they'll like repeat it back. And this is a form of feedback called recasting. If you just repeat the word properly when someone says it wrong. And in these cases, that usually actually isn't helping the child, because the child will actually think that they are saying the word correctly. And recasting as a form of feedback is actually like the most ineffective form of feedback, because even adults usually don't realize that they're being corrected when you just repeat what they said but say it accurately. So minor tangent. Carry on.
Minor tangent. We've got some other like topics coming up a little bit more about like language acquisition and stuff. So we're going to talk about types of like feedback in future episodes if people are curious about that, because it really is fascinating. But anyway, so as you are a developing child, you will get your phonetic inventory. If you're bilingual, then there's a bit of debate about whether it's like one complete set of all of the sounds in both languages or two sets, like whether you distinguish the two sets, like this is my Spanish inventory, this is my English inventory. There's some debate about that, but either way, you end up with like all of the sounds that you need for like the culture and languages that you're living within, right? And these get solidified as you get older. And we've talked a bit about this on the pod before, but that's kind of how you get accents, right? Is your mouth is used to making certain sounds. And so when you're presented with a new set of sounds, your mouth kind of has a hard time figuring out what to do, because if there's a new sound, it takes a long time for you to develop the proper dexterity of your tongue and face muscles to produce the sound properly. And so more often than not, that's what causes those like accents is in people of, like, oh, a French person speaking English sounds like this because, certain sounds don't translate over, or they will like substitute certain sounds. And when we're talking about why white people can't roll their R's, at the core, that's what's happening is in American English, specifically American English, we don't really roll our R's. Like there's not really, it's not a phoneme in our language. Yeah, it doesn't mean anything. Like if you're in a monolingual context and you can roll your R's, it's like a fun party trick, right?
Yeah. And maybe to dive like just a little bit deeper into that specific aspect of phonetics, like different languages use different sounds.
Yes.
Like there is a continuum of sound that the human mouth is capable of producing, and different languages just choose different points in these continuums of vowels and where you can place your tongue. If you're putting your lips together, putting your tongue on your teeth, like blocking out your throat a little bit. Like there's different ways to generate these sounds, and not every language uses every sound because there's so many sounds that we could make. And so as a child, you learn to kind of filter out the sounds that don't matter in your language and to focus on the ones that do. And I think Stacey explained that really, really well. But if you were to take, I want to put in an interesting analogy here.
Yes, like go for it.
In sports, coaches will frequently say that it's way easier to learn something right the first time than to reteach someone who's learned how to do it wrong. And I don't want to apply like right or wrong to language, but just in the context of if you view how you've learned your first language, this is like the first way that you're learning something. And you learn with years and years of practice to always put your tongue in a certain place in your mouth to generate this sound. And you do that for years and years and years. It's going to be the same as with the throwing a baseball, like if you've been doing it for years and years and years a certain way, changing that habit is going to be
Really
way
hard.
harder
Yeah.
than it is for the small child learning to do it naturally
Mhm.
for the context that they need the first time.
Yes.
So I think that might be a simpler analogy for some people to understand.
Yeah, no, I like that. And I mean, you can apply that to basically like any skill involving like muscle memory, like learning music or something. Like it is very, very similar, right? Like once your body gets into this like pattern, that muscle memory kicks in. And honestly, there's like not much that we can do. It's pretty involuntary at a certain point.
You have to unlearn.
Yeah.
Like in order to truly learn a foreign language and sound natural, you have to unlearn some of your habits with your first language. And some people are really good at that, but for most people that is extremely difficult.
Yes. As I've made this analogy 1.5 million times, and I'll make it 1.5 million more because it just kind of fits. When it comes to learning a language and language acquisition, it is very much like acquiring a new skill, like a new sport or learning an instrument. Some people are naturally just very good at it. Some people, you can just put them in front of a piano and they can just play like there's no tomorrow, as if they've been playing for years, right? But other people really have to practice. They have to bash their head against the keys and, work really hard doing drills and stuff to get where they want to be. So language acquisition is just like any skill. For some people, they can naturally sort of hear the differences and they can figure out those differences in their mouth and how to contort their body in such a way to produce the sound. And it just happens naturally for them, it seems. But then other people might not have that skill, that innate ability to replicate those kinds of things, right? Just like, I have a hard time sitting down and just playing the piano. I have to bash my head against it. Some people might have to really work super hard on practicing, how do I move my mouth in this way? How can I like make this more natural? And like you said, unlearn their old patterns to relearn a different one. But it's a skill just like any other skill. With that context in mind, I think that kind of brings us to some of the like social aspects of this question.
Right.
Because the bare minimum answer is like, well, it just takes practice. And, people who are monolingual and don't have, the rolled R in their phonetic inventory, well, they just have to work on it, right? But,
well, and I actually want to share something here that I think is kind of interesting. So in Icelandic, there's a sound, and it's when you have two L's in Icelandic, it's actually not said like L at all.
Right.
It's like a stop and a fricative, and it's a sound that most, Americans have a really, really hard time saying. And I've seen with this Icelandic sound and with a bunch of other contexts, someone will coach a person on being able to say the sound.
Yeah.
And they might actually be able to do it with coaching and training. Like it might be like learning how to snap your fingers. For some people, it takes a lot of effort, but you probably can learn to do it if you work with someone who's a really good teacher. Or same with, playing with a deck of cards. Like you can learn it most likely. There's some people who might not be able to, but you probably can. But one thing that will sometimes happen is that even if you're coached on this sound and you're able to say it, people start distrusting themselves, especially if they're like adults and they're like, oh, was that actually right?
Yeah.
And then they won't naturally repeat it. They'll just go back into their old patterns.
Yeah.
And
that self-inserted negative feedback.
Right. This kind of like distrust of yourself. And so from like my experience with learning languages and stuff, I think it's really important to just like, don't worry what you sound like sometimes. Like just say it, just go for it. Ask people what you sound like and use that honest, explicit feedback. And if it's something that you care about, work on it.
Yes.
But you might not care, right? As long as you can communicate, does it matter?
Exactly. And I think that kind of goes into some of the social implications of the question of white people are technically capable of producing a trilled R. So why can't they do it? What is stopping people from being able to adapt to this sound? As we've mentioned, it could just be that they have a hard time with it and they just need a lot of practice. And maybe they're just not getting a lot of that practice. Another part of it might be sociocultural, of like, okay, well, if we consider perceptions of how people think, how people consider Spanish and how people view it, and, you know, how monolinguals in the United States of America consider, you know, learning additional languages, could it be that white people just don't want to learn it? Which is something that happens, and
It does.
it sucks to say, but like this is something I've seen. It's not just like Americans who will like dig their heels into the ground and say, I don't really want to say it this way because of like cultural reasons or whatever. Like I've seen plenty of like Hispanic people say, no, I don't want to say the word that way. Like I can, but I don't want to because I'm trying to make a statement using my language. I'm making a cultural statement using my language by choosing not to pronounce things a certain way. They're putting off an image about themselves. And you know, for some people, like we said, again, this may be a very conscious choice of like, people are like, yeah, no, I can make the sound, I just don't want to. Or it could be very subconscious. People might not be aware that they're doing it.
Mm-hmm. Or there might be things that they care about practicing more that are going to impact their actual ability to communicate more than being able to roll their R's.
Exactly.
Or another one that I think is interesting that you didn't bring up is I am white. Right?
We both are. For everyone out there who can't see the color of our skin or haven't been here for a while, we're both very white.
But that actually matters in this context because in lots of Latin American environments, it doesn't matter how good my accent is. Everybody is still going to peg me as the gringa, the American, the, you know, how much is it worth it for me to really try to fit in as much as possible when the color of my skin is going to prevent it anyways? And that's not my approach to it. Like I always try very hard to get the language as well as possible, but it's another valid argument.
It is, and it's one that probably a lot of people have. You know, having a very obvious distinction between yourself and like the culture you're trying to assimilate into, more or less, and having that, you know, people calling you out on it can be like a little bit discouraging, and it can be really hard when people are not like super supportive and they're like, you'll just never quite fit in because, you know, you're always going to be a little bit different. That's really hard for a lot of people. And you know, that kind of, it comes from all angles. Like whenever people are trying to assimilate into a different culture or a different language, like there is always that feeling of otherness. And you know, a lot of people will work really hard. I've seen it. My own students work really hard to try and assimilate the best they can because they want to become a part of society. But some people, like some of my students, you know, they're like, well, you know, I'll never quite fit in, so I'll just keep the few things that I've got and just lean into my own identity and accept that otherness of like I'll never quite belong. So there's a lot of these like sociocultural implications of why people do or do not accept certain sounds or even certain structures. Like this idea kind of extends beyond just phonetics.
It does.
And I just kind of want to toss that out there because like sentence structuring, you know, conjugating of your verbs, this all kind of falls into the same pit. It's just, you know, what kinds of little nuances do people pick to maybe keep or, you know, not change or work on or whatever, right? So it just kind of depends. But this kind of problem is very broad and happens all over the world.
Yeah. So I think kind of what I would say, we've discussed this question, I think, pretty extensively. Like I said, I absolutely love the question. I think it's something that a lot of people do wonder about. And I would just say, like, recognize that people who are learning any foreign language have gone through like a very extensive and difficult process.
Mhm.
And the fact that they're able to communicate means that they've put a lot of effort and time into it, even if they're not able to do it perfectly.
Yeah.
And so I think it's just important to acknowledge that and just, assume the best.
Yeah. And I want to do one more tiny tangent before we wrap this up because I feel
Please.
like we hit the core of our message here, but there's one other like fun fact I want to just kind of sprinkle out for people. We've talked about levels of complexity within language, right? We've talked about how, like one language might be really complex in one way, one language might be complex in another way. Well, the sounds that are used, the phonetics in a language are part of that complexity. And even within your own like linguistic system, there's like a scale of like complex sounds, right? There's like the super easy sounds and then there's like the super complicated sounds. And those super complicated sounds can be really hard for children and adults to master alike. And this kind of happens everywhere. I talked earlier today about how it's hard for like English speaking kids to really use their hard R's and say water or writer, right? To really gnaw on that R, it takes practice. And I once knew this amazing linguist from my master's program, and she had done a lot of work in Southeast Asia with a language called Leo. And she had found that there was this one consonant. I can't remember exactly what consonant it was, but it was a very difficult consonant. And it was so difficult that children wouldn't like fully acquire it until they were almost 8 years old. But they would acquire it eventually, but it was just like a really hard sound to produce.
In what language?
It's called Lio, Lio is how it's
Cool.
pronounced. And she found that there was just like this natural delay, and it was just like socially, culturally acceptable for children to not be able to use this consonant until like a certain age, just because it was like inherently difficult to pronounce. And so that's something to just kind of consider as well, is like trilling your R's is kind of a hard thing. If you think about the mechanics behind it, you have to vibrate your tongue at such a speed on your alveolar ridge right behind your teeth at just like the perfect speed for just a brief moment. Like it's difficult. It's difficult. And if it's difficult for a child to learn, it's probably even more difficult for a grown adult to learn. So that's kind of just like my last thought, is that like there is a lot of complexity and difficulty in how speech sounds are actually produced, and that kind of plays into this as well, of like, it's hard, just be nice.
Right.
I feel like that's how we usually end these podcasts, but like this one especially, it's like, yeah, it's hard, and there's definitely a lot of reasons why people might not be able to get there.
Yeah, I love that. And I think we've talked about several sounds across different languages that might be difficult. Like it truly is a universal thing.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you so much for asking this question. Let us know if
absolutely
you have
loved
other topics.
it. Yeah, this is fabulous. We love having questions from our viewers, and we're going to be doing a few more episodes based on some of those questions from that little Instagram call out. But please, if you do have any thoughts or questions or anything, like, we would love to hear it. We eat this shit up. It's so delicious for us.
Definitely. Yeah. So please follow us at For the Love of Language, and also leave us a rating and a review on whatever platform you're listening on. Help us spread the joy if you enjoy hearing us ramble on linguistics topics. And we hope you'll come back for more.
Thanks, guys.